Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Michael Regina. I'm the author and illustrator of the all-ages horror graphic novel The Sleepover, and this is the second video in my solo role-playing series in which I explain how to use solo role-playing games, games like Dungeons & Dragons or Vaesen and whatever game it is that you're interested in, and solo role-playing tools to be able to outline and write your own story. In the first video I gave an introduction to this process and what got me excited about it, so if you haven't watched that yet, I'm going to put a link up around here somewhere. It's also in the description below. In this video I'm going to take you through my first writing session and beginning of an investigative mystery using the game Vaesen. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe and you'll get follow-ups to all this series if you're enjoying it. Also, I want to take a minute and say we had 1,000 subscribers this week, and that's super cool. So thank you so much for everyone who's here. I hope you're enjoying the content I make, and I really hope that you find this content to be useful. One last thing I'll mention before we jump into the page. If you'd like and you're following along with the series, make sure you've signed up for my mailing list below, and you'll get emailed a link to all of my email list content, but specifically for this, I have a folder that I've created for writing with solo role-playing games in which I've shared a checklist that you can use based on the introduction video of this series, where I outline all the things I would keep in mind if you want to try this process out. I'm also included a template that you can use to outline your own adventures as you go, and I've put a document showing the play sessions from this series. So if you want to look at the notes I've been taking as I'm outlining my story, that's there too. That's all I really have to say to intro this series, so without any further ado, I want to get you straight into the session so that you can see how I began outlining this story using Vaesen and the character I've created, Scythe. Hope you enjoy it. See you next time. All right, welcome to the first session in this solo series, showing how I can use role-playing games, playing them solo, to actually outline and create a story. For this specific video, I wanted to take something that I had never really created. I have really no attachment to any of the characters or the world or anything like that, and just see if I can use these tools to weave together a story using basic story structure technique that you might find in something like Save the Cat, that sort of deal, as well as using various different RPG tools to help guide me along. As I said, I'm going to be using Free League's game Vaesen, which is a Nordic horror game. Now, obviously, I don't have a strong connection to things in this culture, but so I'm mostly going to be thinking about it as a backdrop for thinking about the storytelling I want to do and the type of character. I'm not going to lean too much into the specific culture or the setting, but thinking about how I can use it to build a character who solves mysteries about strange monsters and creatures, and they do investigations and so on. But since the creatures that they're fighting are, that she'll be fighting, the character I've made will be fighting, are from this manual, we might sprinkle in some like Norwegian descent, that sort of thing. So let's dive in. First things first, like I said, you want to have set up your game, so make sure you've read the rule booklet. I've read through Vaesen. I've not had a chance really to play it, so I don't by any means expect to be a rule master here, but I've gotten myself familiar enough with the rule set, built my own character so that I feel like I can get going. What was actually really great is because it took me a little time to get to this, during that period, Free League released a solo play manual for playing Vaesen on your own. So rules for playing the game solo or without a GM. And so we have a great resource now that we can use to, you know, kind of supplement what I'm about to do rather than me sort of winging it using other systems. So we're going to be using the Vaesen PDF for the core rule booklet, as well as the general rules, the solo rules, and then I also have the Mythic Game Master pulled up for additional help and aid along the way. But let's dive in and look at the character. The character I've created is a 14-year-old girl named Scythe. I'm already bending the rules a little bit here because within the rule set for Vaesen, it really starts characters at an older teen level or an adult level, and I wanted to make sort of a young teen character that we can get to know and explore her backstory. But her name is Scythe, and she's a 14-year-old girl who is a writer. Her father was a writer. And when you're creating the character, you have sort of a motivation that you create for this character, a trauma that has affected them, and then a dark secret. For August, I've given her motivation as finding a Linda worm. which is a type of Vaesen that we'll explore more if it becomes relevant to the mystery that we're playing. But the reason why she wants to find them is that one of these creatures killed her parents. And the dark secret is that her father's work is a lie, Vaesen are real. So what I've sort of made up in the metafiction is that her father was a professor who wrote a book about how Vaesen are not real and sort of exposing it as this, like, old school mythology for people without, with high superstitions and this sort of thing. And I thought it'd be interesting to say, well, what if her parents died because of a Vaesen, and she has now dedicated her life to stopping these creatures or to confronting them and exposing the truth of her kind of undoing the legacy that her family is known for. She's got a talent known as automatic writing. If it comes up, I will certainly use it. And then a little bit more about her and her equipment. She's got a personal library. I've now got her in my mind that she lives. In fact, here we'll put a character here. Aunt, let's see, what we want to name her. Aunt Tess. So just added this in here. Her relationship, her main relationship is with Aunt Tess, who took parental control over her after her parents' death. And so I've got her in my mind, like she lives with them, she does investigative work, she looks into Vaesen sightings in and around her small city. And what I'm ultimately going to try to do is just put together the seeds of a mystery that I can show you how I can turn it into a broader piece. So for this session, all I really want to do is outline the opening scene, the opening set of scenes leading up to what would be the catalyst within the story. So if we're using the save the cat method, every story starts off with an opening scene, which is something I'll probably come back to once I flesh out and understand my story more. A setup, a sort of theme stated that maybe the story is going to be built around, and then a catalyst that kicks the story off. So I'm mostly going to focus on trying to get us through the first act of this story before I break off and we talk a little bit about that, and I show you kind of how I use these tools to write a draft of an opening scene. Okay, so let's start off. I'm also using a PDF or a Google Doc that I've created here that I'm going to use to keep my notes up for this adventure. So we'll be constantly writing in here. And we're going to just start off with session 1. So opening scene. So with an opening scene, you're often going to go with what you think you would expect to have happen. I have no idea what the story is going to be going forward. I know that August is investigating these kinds of creatures and she's interested in doing it. I'm going to go ahead and say that she has also put flyers up around the town. So maybe in my opening scene, I'm going to show, like, I think that's an interesting thing to start off with. So we open on a small village in the rural country. As we pan through the city, we see signs for a detective, a Vaesen detective agency, and contact info for a girl named August Scythe. So what I like about this idea is that we start off with kind of an establishing shot of this rural city. Maybe we see, I'm going to just notate here, we see misty woods, farmland, and, we'll come back to this as I'm building out the story later, but this sort of thing. But what I also like here, what I want to show, because remember in the opening scene, we sort of want to begin our setup and do what we might call the outer bounds of the story. We want to go ahead and tick off that something's going on here. So as we look at this board, a hand reaches in and takes the flyer. Now, I don't want to know who this is at this point. We're going to come back and figure out who that character is. But I'm setting up my own expectations at this point, because I'm thinking to myself, how do I think this story should generally get going? There's a formula to these mystery stories. We're going to see our characters, see them in their element. Some sort of event will have occurred, but because I don't want to know what that event is quite yet, if I were writing this in a book, I'd probably show that big event first. Like, think if you're watching an episode of The X-Files or something like that, you're going to see sort of this opening scene where the creature attacks somebody or hurts somebody, and you don't know what the creature was, and just as that person dies or gets got or whatever the case might be, we cut to credits. Now, because of the way we're writing this, I'm probably going to come back and think about that scene after I've done my setup, because right now I want to be surprised by the mystery. I want to discover this moment just like August would discover this moment. But what I do know is that somebody is going to see her information and take up a flyer to come meet with her, so that we can get started. So this is the setup. Is we're going to, like, we'll say like there's a scene over here, and I'm going to put up a notation here. I'm going to put it as a teaser scene. Come back to this. We'll come back to this and show what effects the monster had. All right, so now I want to cut inside of August's home. Cut to August's home. Now I gave August a memento, which is a fiddle that has been passed on through the generations. I'm going to say that this was created by her mother, or given to her by her mother. And I like the idea that we open up the morning with her playing the fiddle. And I've put it that she has a personal library, so there's like all the books that her dad has made and all this sort of thing. So I want to see her like in her office or her dad's personal library playing her fiddle. And as she plays the fiddle, we see all of the documents of her research. So I want to see things like books on the table. Notebooks filled with notes. Now again, I'm not looking to be eloquent here. I'm just trying to get ideas out onto the paper. And drawings. Drawings of strange creatures. And maybe we even see a note. Maybe we see a note that says something about a Linda worm being discovered, or maybe we see something about the effects of a Linda worm, of a possible Linda worm in an area. So what I want to do with this scene is I want to slowly introduce you to August. What I like about this scene is that we see as she's sort of playing the fiddle inside of her library, she's playing this, and you get this sense that she's maybe educated and she knows what she's doing. And I'm going to say this time period, we're going to set this in sort of early 20th century time period. Now, I know that opens up a lot of complications for getting like time frames right and all, but I like the idea that this is sort of older school, or and something. Basically what I'm going to say is it's not super modern, no cell phones, no internet, that sort of thing. She needs books, she needs letters and that sort of thing to get by, and I think that helps capture this sort of like vibe between like new world versus the old world and so on. But I like this idea that you get the sense that she's sort of like an intelligent young lady, cultured, can play art, but you get the sense like she is deep into studying something weird. If this is the first time you're meeting her, you might be a little bit taken off by like, what is this? Strange creatures, strange monsters, and this sort of thing. And maybe the music is crescendoing. And when the door opens to the library, it breaks her concentration, and she messes up her note on the fiddle. And then coming into the room, I want to introduce Tess, is Aunt Tess. Now, let's go ahead and dive into figuring out, using some of our solo tools to figure out the state of Aunt Tess. So one of the cool things here is as you're trying to figure out a NPC or whatever, you get a mental state for your characters, and it says to draw 2 cards. The higher card is the NPC's primary mental state, and the lower state is their secondary mental state. And the way Vaesen does this is it does it with a standard deck of playing cards. So I'm going to give them a quick shuffle here. And then I draw 2 cards and I compare the results. So let's take a look down here. I drew a Jack and a 7, both of hearts. So that means that we're going to consult this chart here. That means confident and talkative. So I like this idea. So what I'm thinking then is that essentially as Aunt Tess comes into the room, she's like bubbly and excited. She is energetic and excited, completely oblivious to the effect that she's having on August. And she's come in with breakfast. I want to think some sort of exchange happens between the two of them. So maybe they're talking to one another and generally conversing, and August is annoyed at Tess for having just burst in and breaking her concentration, and Aunt Tess is all like, I'm sorry, dearie, you know, I was just looking, picked you some breakfast this morning, was so excited. She brings in the newspaper, sets it on the table, and she's like, I see you're at your studies again, and they're having this back and forth, and I see August as being quite annoyed by this because she was really trying to concentrate, maybe think through a problem, and so I'm going to just write that. So I'm going to say Aunt Tess is sort of encouraging her, very bright and cheery this morning. And August has been mulling over the notes of her investigation and looking into her parents. But we're going to veil this within the story. And then I'm thinking as August sits down and begins to rest and eat this breakfast, Tess asks her something to the effect of being like, have you had any luck on your advertisements for your agency? And August is like, no, I haven't had any sort of luck into this degree and finding anything else. And as that happens, we're going to introduce the sort of big catalyst event of the story. One question that comes to mind as I'm thinking through this is like, does Aunt Tess, like this is where some of the fun of these thinking processes can come in. I want to know, like, does Aunt Tess believe that, does she believe that the whole Vaesen Lindenworm thing is a real thing, or does she think that this is all kind of phooey and she's just sort of putting up with it? Maybe she believes in her brothers. I'm going to say it was her brother who died. His assessment that these creatures are just sort of figments of people's imagination and this sort of thing. So as I'm thinking through the conversation, I want to know, did Tess believe her brother? And I'm going to say that that was probably pretty likely. So to sort this out, I'm going to use the fate charts, which are found inside of the Mythic Game Master emulator. And I'm going to say it's pretty likely that her brother did not, or that Tess did not believe that Vaesen were real. So did Tess believe that Vaesen were fake? So what that means is I look at this chart here and I basically assess it on this chart here, which runs at a 50-50 odds down the middle, or a likely, and we're sitting here at this 5 chaos level. I can talk more about that if it actually comes up into play, but for what you need to know is I'm basically running in the middle, and then I'm thinking of a likely situation. And what that means is that I'm going to roll a D100, which is a D100, which is a percentile die and a 10 die, and I'm going to roll to see whether or not Tess believes these creatures are real or not, and or whether she believes, so whether she believes they're real. So the question will actually be, does she believe Vaesen are real? So I'm going to say it's unlikely that she believes they're real. I'm sorry, I'm flipping the question to make it make more sense here as we're writing it. And so what that means is I need to roll a 35 or under for her to believe that they are real. So it's a roll low system. So I'm going to roll the 2D100. And I rolled a 35. All right. So rolling a 35 means that Tess believes Vaesen are real. So within the context of this story, that means that she maybe she had some sort of experience that we'll learn more about. I'm gonna roll for it. We don't want to know about it, but I want to roll for it, and I want to think again. Did Aunt Tess have something that occurred to her? Maybe as I'm thinking through this, and this is something I'll just make notations on for now, but as I'm thinking through it, maybe the reason why her dad, August's dad, went one direction and Tess went another is they experienced something as a child, and they both had different interpretations of those events. So maybe she believes, like, yeah, I believe something happened to my brother because I know what we experienced when we were kids, and I always thought he was wrong for thinking they weren't real. So I'm going to say, did an experience happen to Tess and her brother when they were children? And I'm going to say that's very likely. So that means I need to roll a 75 or below to indicate that, yes, they had an experience. So a 62. So remember, below a 75, a 62, I rolled that. That means yes, they had some sort of experience when they were children. So as I'm thinking about this in the story, I'm going to indicate that Tess asked if August has had any luck finding finding cases, because she is actually encouraging August's pursuit of this issue. I don't want to dig into it, but in the back of my mind, that's going to be my thinking, is that Tess believes that these things are real, and that's why she has latched on to helping August figure this out. My dog is having a fit below me. Sorry, you guys. Good? All right. So all I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to make a note on the document. I've just made a quick note regarding that interaction, but see how this is already cool. Like, I had no idea just coming into this story that those were going to be elements that were going to kind of inform the world in which we're dealing in. Now I have some sort of past family trauma or this sort of thing. And I think it's an interesting idea. As I'm thinking through what would be interesting for a theme stated. So inside of the Save the Cat model, one of the things you experience early on in the story is somebody stating the theme of the story, meaning, what is the life lesson the characters are going to think about. And I think this is interesting where we've got one person who's believing this, she's already experienced this sort of trauma, the other one is doing this, and I'm wondering, like, does Aunt Tess, even though she supports her finding this, Aunt Tess has sort of made her peace with the world and sort of made her peace with this idea that these creatures might not be found, or maybe we can't find them, but I know they exist, and I don't need to prove to everybody that they exist. Whereas August wants to prove to everybody that they are real, and they don't believe what she thinks her dad's lies are, and so some sort of statement of theme. So I want to come back here. I'm going to add a theme moment. I think the theme of the story would be Tess saying something to the effect of, even though these things are important, I understand how much this hurt you, that your dad died, but you can't let it determine your future. There you go, something like that, don't let this consume you, it's not your identity, right? Don't let your trauma become your identity. That's an interesting one, because we do have trauma on the sheet, so don't let your trauma determine your future. Your past trauma determine your future. So I think that's an interesting idea. So Tess is going to say something to this effect to August. Don't let your past trauma determine your future, or keep you from your future, from a better future. Something like that. So I like that idea because it sort of shows that there's this kind of interesting element between the two of them, where Tess has had a similar thing. There's sort of a mirroring of experiences, right? And Tess has had a certain interaction with these creatures, and it has affected her deeply, but not defined her life. Whereas her brother, he made it his mission to prove that these things weren't real because he wanted to discount these experiences. And now August is taking up her dad's mantle, but in the opposite direction. And Tess is sort of like, look at what happened to your dad. Don't let your trauma ruin your future. You can have a life that's different, right? I think that's a really cool setup, and that gives us everything that we need to kind of get into the story. We've had our opening scene. We don't know our teaser yet, but we're about to come to it. We've introduced our character, and now we're going to use the role-playing engines to determine what was the mystery. So let's dive into that. If we're using the Vaesen solo mode here, it tells us that there's a few ways you want to set up your mystery. And the first thing is that you want to roll an invitation on page 188 of the rule booklet, a quest giver, and a misdeed. So this is going to tell us, these first 4 points are going to tell us everything we need to get started. So an invitation, a quest giver, a misdeed, and a location in which the misdeed occurred. And since she lives in sort of a more rural location, we're going to keep this rural. So In the Vaesen rulebook, we're going to jump down to 188, which is where it tells me where the charts are. And what we'll see here is our random tables that we can use to determine the course of the events here. So it said the first thing we want to do is roll for an invitation. So let's go ahead and roll for our invitation. In our invitation, we roll just 1d6 though. So a 6. So a scruffy homing pigeon? I don't like that one. I don't like that one, honestly. A scruffy homing pigeon, I'm not quite sure what to do with that. But again, you know, we want to let the randomness affect it, but I'm like, I don't know what to do with that one. So I'm going to start, though. I'm just going to roll this again. I got a 3. So a telegraph message. So she receives some sort of telegraph at the front door of the house. Someone brings her a telegraph. Now, the question is, who brought the telegraph? So this is where we're going to roll the quest giver, or who sent the telegraph, I should say. And it says to roll a d66, and a d66 is just 2d6, and we're going to assign one as our tens and the other one as our singles. And I always do kind of one on the left is the tens, one on the right is the other symbol. So let's roll. So that is a 5 and a 6, so a 56, which means a lawyer representing an estate. So that's kind of cool. So a telegraph has been sent from a lawyer representing an estate of somebody, and some sort of misdeed has occurred. So we're going to roll the 2d6 again, and we get a 2 and a 1. So that is crop failure. So interesting. So we've got a lawyer who has sent forward a telegraph to her home, to August's home, having seen this report, and there is some sort of crop failure at the estate. So let's see what we do for interesting locations, which is on page 192. Now we are out in the countryside. Now I think farm obviously makes a lot of sense. Given the fact that there's crop failure, it could be at a crop failure, or it could be at a farm. So it could be at a farm or maybe at a mansion. But let's roll and just see if something comes up that that's kind of interesting. So I got a 64, which is a wildflower meadow. That's cool. So some sort of estate that has wildflowers or some sort of crop failure, and they've sent forward a message asking for help. All right, so there's our invitation. So what I'm going to do is I just go back here and I log all those entries. So what we have was, here are the bones of the mystery. All right, so that gives us a really interesting bones for the story. So within the story, August is maybe having breakfast, she's eating and talking to Tess about this. Tess makes this comment about, you know, don't let your past trauma determine your future. And then the doc comes at the door and there's a man standing there with the telegraph. She opens it up, brings it to the table, sits down, begins reading it. And there's a description of, you know, hey, I found your flyer. This will be the person's flyer who that we saw take the flyer in the beginning. So maybe the lawyers who took the flyer, and they're saying, you know, we are experiencing some sort of crop failure out on our estate and our wildflower gardens, so our wildflower meadows. So maybe something I want to ask here is, does August recognize this estate? I think that's an interesting question, and I want to find out. If she reads this letter, is this an estate that she would recognize? So I'm going to say it's like a 50-50 chance that she would recognize this estate. So again, rolling the 2d100, it's going to be 50 or under, and a 50 or under would be a yes, and above that would be a no. So a 30, so yes, she does recognize this wildflower estate. In the letter is an invitation to come out to the estate and observe the phenomenon for itself. Maybe the letter says something to the degree of like, you simply have to see it to believe it, and invites her out to the estate, which is maybe out in the countryside outside of the town. It's big sort of mansion or something like that. That uses this sort of, maybe it's like a plantation or something, you know, where these plants are grown and the wildflowers are grown and the business is housed out there. But I don't want to know quite yet what the occurrence is that's happened, because I want to find that out when August arrives at the mansion. And now August needs to make a decision. So if we're using the sort of same save the cat model of things, the catalyst within the story is the invitation to leave and come investigate this mystery. And so now, before we break into Act 2, she would have what you would call the debate section of the story. So this will be a section where she is trying to decide whether she's going to go or not, take up the case. And if I'm thinking through that, we'd have to have some reason why she wouldn't just take up the case. It doesn't even have to be like an ongoing thing. Basically, it needs to be that maybe there's something within the letter. So I'm going to say, like, is there something in the letter that is disturbing to maybe Aunt Tess that makes her think maybe August shouldn't go do this? So we'll figure that I want to fill those details in later after she goes to the estate, but let's try that out. Yes, there's something within the letter that makes her concerned that if August were to go, that Aunt Tess is concerned if August goes, that this could be bad. So maybe, did somebody die? I want to find out, did somebody die? Maybe within the letter it can give this information. So did somebody die or was taken? 19. So somebody has died. So someone has died, and Aunt Tess is afraid of her going because it sounds like there could be a killer on the loose. What if it's not the Vaesen? What if it's somebody else? Could be somebody doing something for their own motives. So maybe the debate section of this story is them going back and forth, and maybe August sees this, she's like, first case, let's go. She jumps up, she's like getting her stuff ready, packing her books and everything, and Aunt Tess is like, whoa, wait a minute, we don't know what this place is, we don't know what's going on, somebody's gone missing, this sounds like a very serious case, and they're at odds with each other, and then Tess sort of relents, or August says, you know what, why don't you come with me? And maybe that's the persuasion. She wants to say, will you come with me to Aunt Tess? And Aunt Tess is, we can roll to see if that works. Let's roll to see if that works. So August is like, come with me, and you can be with me on this guide. So let's go over to Tess, or August, and look at her character sheet. So manipulation, empathy is down here. That's her skill level. Now the way this game works, you roll a number of d6 equal to the attribute or skill that the character is going to be doing. And then if any of them are a success, that means that they're able to accomplish what they were going to do. And a success is that you have to roll a 6. If you roll a 6, it's a success. So you roll big pools of dice. And so right now, empathy is this one here. And she does not have a manipulation. Or maybe, you know what, I want her to inspire Aunt Tess. I want her to be like trying to get Aunt Tess super pumped up about the possibility of going out here. And so she wants to be super pumped up about the possibility of going and helping. And so she's going to try to inspire her. I don't know exactly what she would say, but the feeling of this debate moment is going to be, you know what, I'm going, whether you like it or not. I want to go, but I want you to come with me. And that's sort of the debate. She's like, you got to go with me. So I need 1 success. So I'm rolling a total of 7 dice. I need 1 6. And I got my 1 6. So August is able to inspire Aunt Tess and say, come with me out to the estate. We can do this together. If you're worried for my safety, come with me. I trust you. It'll be great. We can go hang out in the country together. It'll be a nice chance for us to get away, something like that. So they agree, and they gather up their things, get in take a trip out to the train, and begin the trek out to this estate out in the countryside. And that's where I'm going to leave off this session. We'll come back next time to see what happens next.